Hi, welcome to Gotta Ping, a careers podcast you should listen to if you want to grow your career online and offline. Hi, my name is Mei Ping, and I'm a professional career coach and international speaker with more than a decade of experience at some of the biggest companies in the world. To learn more about what I do, visit meiping.com. That's meiping.com. All right, let's jump right into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Grow Your Career Online and Offline podcast. So, in today's episode, I want to tell you why you should always negotiate your salary. So, when I say salary, I mean your monthly salary, your benefits, your annual leave, and everything else, right? So, basically, the entire compensation plan. One of the biggest mistakes I see when working with my clients and really talking with a lot of corporate professionals out there is that there is this misconception that the monthly salary is the most important thing. And this was a mistake that I made for a very long time. So, in the earlier half of my career, I've always been very focused on just increasing my monthly salary. So, I didn't really think about the annual compensation plan. I didn't really think about the other benefits and basically like the other elements within the entire compensation plan. And what a big mistake it was, because the fact that I didn't actually understand the entire compensation plan basically created a bit of a massive problem for me later on in my career, because when I was jumping from one or rather moving from one role to the other, because I was so fixated on the monthly salary, there were certain career moves that I made where the entire compensation plan, like for the whole year, wasn't really the most attractive, even though the company could pay me a very high monthly pay. So it was a really big mistake, because at certain point in my career, when I moved to certain roles, and it's definitely something that you need to take note, is that how you negotiate your overall compensation plan for this current job, it's gonna affect your next job and your next job and your next job. Because in most instances, HR will always ask for your salary slip, right? So a lot of times the job offer, right, the new company's compensation plan will make reference to your earlier um, to your earlier salary slip. So this was definitely a mistake I made, because there were certain roles that I took that I really didn't know how to negotiate. And a lot of times I also just trusted the HR person or the recruiter to just give me the amount that I thought I deserve. Or, if it sounded like, well, that's the industry standard, probably it's pretty okay. Or I basically bought in a lot of nonsense that people told me, hey, it's a good career opportunity. Hence, you should take less money, or we can't give you a lot of increment because it's a good opportunity. So if you're nodding your head and say, oh, yeah, I mean, probably I will also take less pay if I can learn something. Let me tell you that that is actually the wrong mindset to have. And that was a mindset I had a very long time. And eventually what happened was that, like, it really affected my ability um, to get paid what I'm actually worth. So throughout my career, the problem was that because the earlier part of my career, like the pay was, I mean, I didn't really work out the pay properly. So that meant that even though I was taking up more responsibilities, probably I was rising up the corporate ladder, I was taking up a lot more roles, the responsibility and the seniority where I was at, I didn't feel that I was being compensated fairly, if that makes sense. Because when you take on more responsibility, you take on more accountability, you're responsible for so many things, there is a certain amount of like money, right? That's actually worth it, which is why we're all in a job, right? Want to make sure that we are also compensated fairly for the amount of effort, time and energy that we put in. But because of my like poor planning and poor negotiation skills, and like lack of courage of like really having that conversation with HR on my compensation plan, what that meant was later on in my career there were actually more frustrations, because when you are at a certain like salary, right? in the current job, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to negotiate unless you get a promotion. And even if you get an in-job promotion, sometimes like the jump is not very high compared to if you join externally, or even if you get an increment, it's probably not a lot, right? Unless you actually get a promotion, or like you're like top flyer, and it also depends on the performance of the company. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that there are a lot of variables that you cannot control once you sign the job offer, once you join the team. So it's really important that at the point of right before you sign up, sign the contract, right? Sign the employment contract, you really need to make sure that you negotiate. And I can share a very quick story with you. And this was something that my ex boss told me. And I know he listens to this podcast. So if he's listening to this, he'll know I'm talking about this. And one of the very big lessons that he taught me was something that he actually said to me. And he said that, Mei Ping, it is actually your fault that your salary is not as high as where it should be, because you didn't learn how to negotiate earlier on in your past jobs. And right now, even if I want to give you a very very high pay, right, from a percentage standpoint and like company policy or whatever, it's going to be a lot more challenging, and that would then mean that your pay is going to get capped at a certain amount to meet all these whatever policy. So there was something that really resonated with me, because up till that point it didn't really hit me that, hey, maybe it was actually my fault that I didn't know how to negotiate, or rather maybe I wasn't courageous enough, or I didn't know how to go about it, and I just expected that people are just going to pay me whatever that I was worth, without actually sitting back and really asking myself how much is a fair amount of, like, salary plan or a salary package that is really worth the value that I'm adding, right? The good job that I'm giving. Because one thing you need to remember is that, like, the ability for you to do a good job, it it is not related to how many years of experience that you have, right? For somebody who has worked for 5 years but doing the exact same thing every single day, it's not better than somebody who has worked for like 3 years but they have been doing like different things, and they're top performer, and they have like, you know demonstrable achievements. So it's not something that is tied to the number of years that you have worked. However, if you don't learn how to negotiate from the start, then it will definitely affect your ability to actually get compensated and get paid what you actually deserve. And that was really something that was quite frustrating for me for quite a while. And I'm actually really thankful to my ex boss for um, sharing this very important lesson to me. It was really something that he pointed out to me that I didn't even think about, right? It didn't even cross my mind. And I thought that was a really, really important lesson at the midpoint juncture of my career. And from then on, every single time I moved to a different company, every single time I was allocated bigger responsibilities, every single year at the end of the performance year, I always negotiate. I always make known what are my expectations for the next 12 months and how I like to be compensated, right? So I always negotiate hard, because that was really a lesson that I learned. And I actually wish that I learned this lesson a lot earlier in my career. But anyway, the fact that I learned it is much better than not learning it at all. Um, so that is why nowadays, like, my clients who are job seekers, I always teach them how to negotiate. And because honestly, if you don't try, you don't get, right? 100%, you don't try, you don't get. And for some of my clients, they have actually seen really good successes as well. Like one of my clients, she got an increment of 39%, like annual compensation plan, because she negotiated. Some of my clients where initially they were asked to take like pay cuts because they were transitioning across industries, they didn't have to take a pay cut. In fact, they could still make sure that they were compensated a little bit more than what they were making in the previous industry or the previous role. So really the ability to negotiate is so important. Can you imagine taking like 50% of the pay? How are you going to climb back up from there? It's going to take you a very, very long time. So just make sure that you understand the impact of like not negotiating and how that can really affect your career many years, and you may eventually get stuck in multiple companies or multiple jobs, not really making what you deserve in terms of the value that you can bring. And I think that is something that actually is very unfortunate. And for those of you who are working a full-time job, your year-end performance review, right, which is normally in November or December, is the best time for you to actually have that conversation with your boss during your annual performance review as to what is the overall value that you have brought to your team, to the department, to the company for this, past 12 months, and where do you see yourself growing in this company, and basically how you're going to get compensated for the amount of work, or right, whatever that's planned for you next year. It's a very delicate conversation, but I think it's a really important conversation to have. And for my clients, I actually go through with them a little bit more detail on how to have that conversation. But for today's podcast, the point I want to make here is that you must have that conversation. The best time to have that conversation is right before you sign the offer letter. The next best time to have that conversation is during your mid-year or annual performance review. And if you are not having those value conversations, those negotiation conversations, then don't complain later on when you don't see progress, when you feel that your position is stuck, you feel that your pay is stuck, because just to quote my ex-boss, it's your fault. So some food for thought in today's episode, and I hope that this episode actually inspires you to really want to have that courage, right, to take the first step and to really start negotiating, because you will really be able to see how it can really help you along your career journey as well. So with that, I wish you all good luck and all the best with your negotiation. Cheers. Thank you for listening to this episode. For more awesome content like this, remember to like and subscribe. Also, head on over to my website, meiping.com, that's meiping.com, and subscribe to my weekly newsletter for more career growth and personal development tips. You can find the links in the description box below. Once again, you're listening to Gotta Ping, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!